Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave. Welcome to the show that's all about how to podcast. It's kind of in the name. And you're home for community around podcasters who love podcasting and would love to meet you. So you're in the right spot. If this is your first time here, thank you for pressing play. There's a lot of episodes to listen to. A lot of great people have been on the show. Glad you're here. And if you're on the search for how to podcast as a starting point or how to grow, you found the right spot. So welcome to the How to Podcast series. I want to talk about getting to the content faster and how to hook your listeners. I've got 4 essential tips for getting to the content fast in your podcast, because I think it's something we need to do better at. And I'm challenging you to try to do this on your next episode. With that all in mind, I've kind of introduced myself. Let's jump into this because I think it's something we need to talk about, and we need to investigate whether we're doing a good job on this or if there's some room for improvement in our next episode. Thanks for being here. Let's get right to it. So you go into the theater, you got your popcorn, you got your drink, you go in there and you sit down in your comfy seat, screen's black, and then all of a sudden the lights dim and you're like, oh, here we go. And they start playing a bunch of commercials for other movies you don't know about. And then finally, we get to that action-packed movie you've been dying to see. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm here. You're like, you got goosebumps. I got goosebumps talking about it. You got goosebumps. You're ready to go. And they come on the screen, and instead of diving right into the action sequence like your James Bond, where you're racing along the cliff and there's bullets flying and there's motorcycles jumping all over and you're doing flips and changing gears, and it's just right in. You get someone explaining their LinkedIn profile. You get, think about the news. You turn on the news, you're ready to hear about something that's really important that's happening in the news. And before we get to that, well, let me just tell you about what I had for dinner yesterday. Oh my gosh, the best waffle ever. It was so good. And you're like, what's going on here? Like, I want to get to the thing. And the beautiful thing about action movies is it gets you into the action, bam, right in. Like there's no explanation. There's no setting the scene. There's nothing. You're just, bam, there's bullets flying. You're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Who's right? Who's that guy? Why are they chasing us? How many cars? What? There's a helicopter, and then there's a bomb, and there's a thing, and there's this, and there's that. You're trying to figure this all out in real time with no context. You're just like thrown right into it. And that is so engaging because you don't want to miss a second because you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And in podcasting, I kind of feel like we don't do a great job of bringing people in right away to the point where they put their phone away, either turn it upside down or stick it in their pocket or put it away somewhere, and they're in. They're in. They've made their choice. I'm sticking to this podcast episode because I feel like I'm already in. And I think we can do better at this, okay? And I want to challenge you to think about how you do your next episode. And if you're bringing people in right from the moment they press play, because the better we do at this, I think the better you're going to see your results and your interaction and the growth of your show, because it's all tied into the listener's experience when they come to your podcast. 10 minutes of commercials, chit-chat, the weather, what you had for dinner, your daily routine, things that have nothing to do with the topic of what you're talking about. All those things seem to detract and take some of the steam out of your show and some of that initial impact and initial draw. And I think we could probably do some of this stuff a little bit better. So I want to talk again about how we hook our listeners better. And we're going to go through 4 things and share these with you. They'll all be in the show notes attached to this on your phone. You can see them right there. You don't have to go to my website to see these. They're right there for you, and you can follow along as we go if your phone's in your hand. If it's not, like when I listen, my phone's in my pocket. I don't look at show notes. I just love listening to you. So that's kind of my approach to podcasting. So there's 4 things I want to talk about. I want to talk about starting with a strong hook. I want to talk about how you introduce the main topic quickly, how you can, limiting commercial breaks is a good thing in podcasting, and then how to engage with immediate content. 4 things to make your podcast better. Here we go. We're going to start off with number 1. Start with a strong hook. When you set out to do your next episode or your very first episode, I want you to think about how you can begin your podcasting with an intriguing question, a surprising fact, or a compelling statement that directly relates to the episode's main topic, what you're talking about. Not the fact that your cat is sleeping 10 feet from you, as Penny is doing right now, but more about the topic of what we're talking about. If you press play on this episode around hooking your listeners, and I tell you that an interesting story about my cat, you're like, what? I don't get it. Why are we talking about cats, Dave? You want to get right into the topic and bring your audience in. That's the uniqueness of podcasting, is you can do it this way and you can reach your audience and connect with them right from the moment they press play. The hook should grab a listener's attention and immediately make them curious about what's coming next, just like your favorite James Bond or action movie. Example, did you know that 70% of people struggle with this common issue? Today, we're diving into solutions that can change your life. Okay, well, okay, now I know what we're talking about. Did you know that 93% of stats are made up? Okay, well, that's interesting. Right now, I want to know. Try to do something at the beginning of your show that involves action, involves somebody saying, wait, I want to check this out. I want to know more about fill in the blank. Figure out how you can create something that hooks people. Think of your favorite fishing trip. When you're standing on the dock or in a boat in the middle of the lake or wherever fishing, you want to get something for your efforts. You want to cast out the line, catch a fish. That's kind of the job. That's what fishing is, right? Beyond relaxing and getting bit by a lot of bugs, it's fun when you can catch a fish. You need to know how to bait your hook the right way to catch the best fish. And you need to know who you're fishing for, right? An action point is a great way. Start with a hook. The second thing is to introduce the main topic and do it quickly. After you've done your initial hook for your episode at the beginning, the second part then is to quickly transition into introducing the main topic or the guest or whatever. And keep this introduction concise, like 30 to 60 seconds, so listeners can understand what they're going to gain from tuning in. So, an example, if you have a guest, try this. In today's episode, we're going to be joined by Dave, an expert in podcasting, who will share practical tips on how to overcome imposter syndrome. Let's get started. That's much better than, my guest today is Dave. Dave, can you introduce yourself? Because I didn't look you up online. Or Dave, you're an expert in you. Can you introduce yourself to everybody? Or reading my LinkedIn bio for 10 minutes. I don't think people need to know where I went to school. Or that, my favorite hobby is fill in the blank. I don't think we need to know all that. Let's get to Dave. He's the guest, right? Let's talk to Dave. I want to hear his voice as close to the beginning as possible. Get to that action point as soon as you can. Another thing to consider around podcasting is to limit the amount of commercial breaks. This whole thing about commercials, I'll do an episode or more about this in the future. When I come to my favorite podcaster and I press play and I get back to back to back commercials about a bunch of random things, or like a bunch of podcast commercials in during my podcast that breaks up the content, really frustrating, especially when I have no interest in what's being sold. It's just a pattern disrupt. And for me, as a frequent podcast listener, I listen at work, 8-hour shift, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. I listen to podcasts. Basically, I listen to a lot of shows, and there's a lot of shows I've unsubscribed from because of the amount of commercials. Great content, great people, but I really don't need that many commercials in my show. And when you put them at the beginning of your podcast, what does that feel like? I don't. That's not a good feeling as a listener to walk into a wall of commercials. That's called radio, and that's why I'm not listening to radio. That's why I listen to podcasts, because I don't want to listen to that many commercials. And you'll notice in all of my 8 podcasts, I don't have any commercials. You, the listener, support me through my Buy Me a Coffee links or whatever. I don't have any commercials here at all. So that's my focus. I don't put that in front of you. I don't break away from the conversation to go sell a mattress. I don't have the numbers to substantiate somebody wanting to be a sponsor of my show. And I really am not chasing it, and I don't have any real reason to. So I don't have a wall of commercials, as you may have noticed. I really need you to be very conscious of how much commercial inventory you have in your episodes. If it's too much, maybe ask your audience. You may be pushing a little too hard. And where you place it is also important. If your podcast includes ads, consider placing them strategically after the introduction or within segments rather than at the beginning. Most sponsors are going to want you to have them near the beginning because that's where people start. And people drop off during the episode. You're still here, so we're best friends. Some people come to your episode, they press play for a few seconds and they bounce. So that's where sponsors want. They want to be up front. They want to be in the middle. They really don't want to be at the end. So when you're building out your podcast, if you have all your commercials at the beginning, you're just bombarding your new listeners who've never been here before with a wall of content that's not you. I press play on the podcast because I want to connect with you, not your sponsor. I want to connect with you. You're the reason I'm here. By limiting how much you inundate your listeners with commercials at the beginning, this helps you to keep some initial momentum going and avoid losing listeners before they even hear what you're going to talk about on the episode. So you can use things like, I don't do this, but you can use things like, before we jump into our discussion today with Dave from the How to Podcast series, a quick word from our sponsor. And then back to our conversation as you come back from it. You could do things like that, fine. But the one thing I would say, again, on a side note, is if you are going to have commercials in your podcast, at least have them somewhat relatable to the listener that may be listening to your show. So don't pick something that doesn't relate. If you have a podcast around recovery and getting over alcohol abuse, you don't want to have a gin and tonic commercial or beer commercial. That does make zero sense. So make sure that what you're talking about relates to the audience. Okay? Please be careful with that. Limit the amount of commercials that you have in your show. Give your content a chance to connect with your audience, and don't bury your content with commercials which make people skip or leave your show before they've even heard your voice or the voice of your guest. And then the last one would be all around engaging with immediate content. So what do I mean by immediate content? That's basically that. Content that's immediate. You dive right into your first segment of your content without an unnecessary filler or explanation or long diatribe of what's happening and why you're here and the reason for the show. Just get into it. Just start. I love you already. You're my favorite podcaster. You don't have to convince me to stay. I love you. I want to get to the content. I love when podcasters, when they use a storytelling approach or present a relatable scenario to me that connects with me as an audience member and pulls me in right away. So example, you could say something like, let's kick things off with a real life story that illustrates our topic perfectly. This happened to me today. Oh, okay. I like this. This is something that makes me want to connect with you, and I like you. So I want to hear what happened to you today. But I also like the fact that you're tying it into the topic, and it's not some fluff piece that you're putting at the beginning that just has nothing to do with anything that we're going to talk about in this episode. I love that you're bringing me in to the content with a personal story that you have lived. I want to know more about you. And the more stories I hear about you, the more I feel connected to you, and I will come back. And I'll listen to the entire podcast episode because I like you, because you connect with me. You make a connection from the beginning, and then you come back during the episode and reconnect with me at multiple points, bringing me back into the conversation so I don't feel like I'm up in the stands far from the action on the field. I'm right here with you, and you're walking me through this together, one-on-one, you and me. As we kind of look back at this and think about what we've covered today, we looked at these 4 things that can really help you to connect with your audience quickly. Start with a strong hook, introduce the main topic quickly, limit the amount of commercials that break up the content or bury your listeners when they hit play in the first few seconds of your episode, and engage with immediate content. By implementing all of these strategies together in your next episode, you can create a more engaging and listener-friendly and listener-focused podcast. Starting strong not only captures the attention of your listener, but also sets the tone for an enjoyable and informative episode that keeps your audience coming back for more. And that's what we want as podcasters. We don't want people to come for one episode and leave. We want them to come back. And we need to build that into our content, build that into how we do our show, the tone of our show, the welcome, how people feel welcome to our show, how people feel engaged with us. You're the one that has to set the tone. You have to go through that door first before they'll follow you. So you need to set it up right from the beginning, bring people in, and compare it to your next time you go to the theater, go on Netflix or wherever, and you press play on an action movie. What happens in the first 10 seconds? What happens? Are you thrown into something that's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get out of this? That's what you need to think about for your next episode. And if you have fallen into the trap of long intros and 10-minute introductions of guests, or just throwing it to your guests to introduce themselves, if you are unprepared, if you go off on tangents and you talk about your life in long detail before you get to why we're here, maybe put some of that stuff at the end of the show. Because at the end of the show, here, you and me together, these are the people who know you and listen to every episode and listen to the end. So if you really feel compelled to talk about the thing, put it at the end. Because that's the people that really love you the most. You're here. People come to the end of the show. They are here for a reason. They will stick to the end. Now is a perfect time to get in here and share your story. This is the great time for you to connect with your audience and let them see a little bit more of you. And for an example, my wife and I went to Calgary recently for a podcast conference. Had a great time. And I just want to say thanks to everybody at Pod Summit out in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. You guys did a great show. You put on a great event. I got to meet great people. And definitely, highly recommend everyone go to podsummit.com and check it out. If you're a Canadian podcaster, an American podcaster, wherever you want to come to Calgary and see some great people, there'll be a new one in 2025. But love for you to go there. I'd love to meet you. But a great podcasting event. And I love new podcasting events because it's a chance to do something new and meet some new people. So if you're interested, that's something we did recently and had a great time. Lots to talk about that we learned there that I'm going to bring to the show to share with you as well. And again, thank you so much for being here. In the show notes, on top of all the information we shared today around how to hook your listeners, all the notes are there, as well as a link into my calendar. Anytime you want to, let's get together, chat about your show. It's completely free, doesn't cost you a penny, and you can use it as often as you want. Let's get together, talk about your podcast. I'll answer any questions I can, give you a sounding ear, listen to your show, talk about your artwork, help you with your website, answer anything to do with podcasting. I'd love to be there for you as a resource. Thank you for listening to the show, and would love to have you back for the next episode. Again, thank you so much for being here. This is episode 300, but technically there's Daily Daves, there's all a bunch of different episodes. This is around 400 to 500 episodes we have total, and you've been here for all of them. For those that listen long-term, thank you. For those that are be here for the first time, welcome to the community. We'd love to meet you in the future. Thanks for being here, and catch you on the next episode. Get out there and hook your listeners with your next episode, and send me the feedback. I'd like to hear what you did, what you tried, and what you stopped doing as a result of this episode. Thanks for listening. Take care, guys. Hey, thanks for being here at the end of the podcast. This is just for you because you're still here. Thank you for your support for the podcast. Thank you for listening to the show, sharing it with other podcasters. maybe somebody you know is thinking about starting a show, I would love for you to say, hey, wait. You should go check out the How to Podcast series. It's got everything you need. And Dave as well is included. You get one free Dave with the How to Podcast series. I'm included with it. So kind of a bundle thing you get. To that point, mentioning it in the podcast, definitely want to remind you here at the end, there's a link in the show notes. Starting it this summer, I'm working through this. It's a way for us, you and I, to have a conversation around podcasting. I want to help you. And I've been doing this for people who listen to the show now for almost 3 years. And I just haven't been promoting it as a thing. So I'm now promoting it as a thing. I want to spend time with you. I kind of would love to hear your voice. We're going to jump on Zoom together. We're going to talk about your podcast. You get time one-on-one with me, 30 minutes in my calendar, completely free, no strings attached. You don't have to buy a blender or a vacuum or none of that stuff. No. Just us. I just like to help you. And whether you're thinking about starting a show or you have a show, you want to grow your show, whatever it is, I'd love to meet you, talk about your struggles, your questions, work together. And I am eventually developing this into more of a coaching program for podcasters. But I'm starting with my best friends first, for free. So if you're interested, you listen to the show, and I appreciate you. Link in the show notes. Let's get together and talk podcasting, okay? You and me. Let's talk. Let's talk soon. See you. Thanks.